Today we learned that last month our economy had 0% inflation. In July, we saw a drop in gas prices and a range of other goods like clothing and airfares and household appliances. It is clear that our nation is making progress.
Wow, all that sounds so amazing. That was Vice President Kamala Harris yesterday, continuing to push the administration's narrative that inflation is at 0% and the economy is looking up, even though the July inflation numbers show consumers are still paying 8.5% more for goods and services compared to last year, and that's at nearly a 40-year high. Joining us now to discuss is the host of the Trish Regan Show, Trish Regan. Trish, it's always good to see you. Welcome to the show. All right, so yesterday, President Biden also making the same claim that inflation was at 0%. I love these word games that they play. He says their economic plan is working, and then you even had Karine Jean-Pierre, press secretary, say this, quote, "We just received news that our economy had 0% inflation in July. While the price of some things went up, the price of other things like gas, clothing, and more dropped. In fact, the current drop in gas prices is the fastest in a decade, saving American families with 2 cars $106 per month on average." They just love to shift the narrative to make it sound so great. But Trish, as you know, the reason gas prices are going down, which caused the CPI to be lower, is because the demand is going down because Americans have realized, I can't afford this gas. It's just too expensive.
Yeah, I mean, I think that a lot of Americans have been scaling back, which is why there's so many concerns right now about the economy, which has now experienced 2 quarters of decline in overall GDP. So look, it's kind of a vicious cycle, right? Because as inflation kicks in, typically what you would see is that the consumer starts to pull back. That hadn't happened previously, Lyndsay, and the reason for that was because, well, people had a lot of savings, right? They were keeping their powder dry because the Biden administration had sent out all those checks, and consequently, people were pretty flush with cash. That cash has sort of dried up, and people are now making decisions to pull back. So it's good that gas prices are coming down, but you kind of got to say, well, why are they really? They're really coming down because people, they aren't taking that road trip this summer that they thought they were going to do because it's too darn expensive.
Yeah, you mentioned the vicious cycle. So we do know that the energy market is pretty volatile. So if people do start consuming more gas and the demand increases, could we see inflation go back up?
Sure. And by the way, it's still pretty darn high compared to this time last year. I mean, you're still talking about numbers that we haven't seen, certainly in my career. I mean, you got to go all the way back to the 1970s to see really anything like this, and into the early 80s. And so we still have very persistent inflation, which means the Federal Reserve is still going to be trying to get it under control, which means we're dealing with a double whammy, right? On the one hand, you got consumers saying, I can't afford this because it costs too much. And then secondly, you've got the Fed pulling back as it needs to, but this hurts. And I don't see an easy path to the so-called soft landing everyone's hoping for. In fact, I think you're going to have a whole lot more problems ahead. But look, it becomes political. And so the Biden administration, they're doing their darndest to try and make this really sound good. But it's a little like, remember, back in the year 2000, during the height of the tech boom, and some banks got in trouble, including a very well-known analyst on Wall Street, for saying, let's put some lipstick on this pig, when they took a company public. It's kind of like that. They're trying to put some lipstick on this pig. The economy's not in good shape.
Yeah, great analogy there. I do want to get your take on what Larry Summers said, Obama's former economic advisor. Listen.
I still think we have a very serious inflation problem in this country. I don't think that inflation problem is going to go away of its own volition. And so I think we're likely to have some quite turbulent times ahead.
Okay, so he says out of its own volition. The White House wants to do this Inflation Reduction Act, which I want to talk to you about in a minute. But what can be done? Does the Fed need to jump in here? Jerome Powell said that he might. What more can be done?
Look, we're in a bad spot Larry gets it. Larry, who, by the way, as you pointed out, has worked for a number of Democrat administrations. So we're not talking about a conservative here. He has spent his whole public life either in the Clinton White House or in the Obama White House, and then, of course, in academia. But he is a very, very smart economist. And I will tell you this, Larry called it very early on in terms of the aftermath that we would be facing. He said it would be mass inflation, and he was right. And he, like me, said all along the Fed needs to stop doing all this printing. But yet we had the administration as well as the Federal Reserve giving tons of money to the economy. And so we are where we are. You couple that in with the fact that now they're going to spend more money. We're talking $700 billion plus, right? You got $80 billion just going to the IRS. For goodness sakes, Lyndsay, like we're putting more money into the economy to try and deal with inflation. It's going to have a really bad effect. But Larry's right. I think we could be in for many, many more problems.
Not good. I don't have a lot of time left, but do want to ask you this because tomorrow the House will vote on this Inflation Reduction Act, which likely will pass. And as you pointed out, $80 billion to aid the IRS, 80,000 new IRS agents. Republicans are very concerned about what this could mean for auditing lower income families. Here is how California Congressman Ro Khanna responded to that. Watch.
I tell them, like everyone, pay your taxes. I mean, this is not designed for tax clever schemes. This is going after people who just aren't honestly paying their taxes. Most people are teachers or firefighters. You have to, on the W-2, you're honest about your taxes. And if people are honest about their taxes, this won't be an issue.
Okay, agree they should pay their taxes, but then you had Janet Yellen come out and say that the IRS shouldn't use this money to audit families who make less than $400,000. This feels like a double standard here. Only have 30 seconds.
Beyond double standard. Let me tell you, if they really wanted to go after people that should be paying taxes, for goodness sakes, they should have closed the darn private equity fat cat loophole, right? Where you have private equity executives paying less percentage-wise in taxes on their income than those firefighters and those school teachers. But nope, Kristen Sinema gets $500,000 from the private equity industry, and Chuck Schumer gets $1.28 million from the private equity industry. So they left that loophole open. So they're not going after the wealthiest Americans. Heck, they give them a free pass. And that's what makes me so angry about all of this. That industry can lobby to make sure their executives are protected. But what about the rest of America? What about small business owners that are fighting, Lyndsay, with all the bureaucratic red tape that they have to deal with on a daily basis? And now the IRS, too. I'm not saying anybody should try and get around anything. We don't want to be Greece. Remember Greece during the 2008 sort of aftermath, right? European financial debt crisis. We don't want to be that. Yeah. But we need a much easier system, and this isn't it.
Yeah, amen to that. Well said. Trish Regan, always good to see you. Thanks for being here.
Good to see you, too.
J.P. Morgan's CEO is warning that an economic hurricane is coming. Are you preparing? If you don't do anything, your 401k could be a 201k, and that is not good. So call our trusted friends at Lear Capital. For 25 years, Lear has helped investors own gold to protect against market chaos. It's a good thing. They can help you, too. Get your information and up to $15,000 in bonus IRA gold. Just call this number, 800-880-4300. That's 800-880-4300.